The story I'm about to share with you is not an easy one to tell. It's not a common story, and it's certainly not one that any of us would want to experience. But it's a story about family, about complicated relationships and fragile boundaries. Sometimes the things we take for granted become ambiguous and confusing. It's the story of me and my daughter Emily through small, seemingly innocuous moments. Things slowly changed, and we found ourselves at a crossroads that neither of us wanted to be. What brought us to this point, and is there a way back? I invite you to listen and feel with me. It was a peaceful afternoon, the sun just beginning to set behind the tall buildings, casting a warm orange glow over our quiet neighborhood. And I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, the soft hum of the radio playing in the background. My daughter Emily had just returned home from a weekend away at college. There was a calm, comfortable energy in the house, a peace that came from familiarity. Emily had grown up so quickly. It felt like only yesterday. She was the little girl who followed me around the house, asking me endless questions about life. She was 21. Now, she was no longer the little girl I remembered, but a strong, confident, and sometimes unintentionally aloof young woman. The dynamic between us had changed as she had grown up, and that was something I was still getting used to. Dinner was ready, and I called her from the living room as we sat down at the table. I noticed the way she looked at me was different. Intense, in a way that made me stop at first. I dismissed it as my imagination. We talked about her classes, her friends, and how much she missed home. But the way she spoke, the way she looked lingering on my arm longer than usual, made me feel something I couldn't quite put into words after dinner. We decided to watch a movie together, something we used to do before she left for college. The living room felt cozier than usual, the dim lighting and soft cushions making for the perfect setting for a quiet night. I couldn't remember the last time we'd had such a peaceful evening together. As the movie played, I found myself glancing at her, more than I should have, noticing how she'd grown. She was no longer the child I had raised, but a woman. And then just as I began to feel a strange unease about the thoughts running through my mind, she moved closer to me on the couch. At first, I thought it was harmless. But then her hand brushed mine. A spark shot through me as if there was something between us that shouldn't have been there, something electric, a feeling I knew I shouldn't have felt. I quickly pulled my hand back, startled by the intensity of the moment. "What's wrong, Dad?" she asked, her voice soft. Almost most worried, I looked at her, my heart pounding, not knowing what to do or say. Nothing. "Baby, I'm just tired." It was all I could say, trying to brush it off and hoping she wouldn't notice the tension between us. But I knew something had changed in that moment. There was something we couldn't ignore. The line between father and daughter had blurred, and though neither of us had crossed it, the air was thick with unspoken thoughts. We sat there in silence, the movie still playing in the background, but neither of us really paying attention anymore. I got up, told her I needed to go to bed early, but as I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us as I lay in bed that night. My mind raced with thoughts. I knew I couldn't let this feeling grow. I had to keep my distance for both our sakes. But deep down, I wasn't sure. The next morning, I woke up feeling restless, the events of the night. For replaying over and over in my head, I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head. I was her father, nothing more, nothing less. I loved her deeply, but not in a way that could be misunderstood. I was being unreasonable, I told myself. When I came downstairs, Emily was up and sitting at the kitchen table with a book. She greeted me with a smile as if nothing had happened. Maybe it really was nothing, just a strange moment that only I could notice. "Good morning," I said, trying to smile and sound as normal as possible. "Good morning, Dad," she replied, her voice soft and pleasant. "I was thinking of going for a walk later. Would you like to join me? It's been a while since we've done anything together." I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should spend so much time alone with her after what I felt last night. But then I told myself that it was just a walk between father and daughter, nothing wrong with that. "Sure," I replied, trying to sound pleasant. "Sounds nice." That afternoon we drove to a park near our house, where Emily and I had walked so many times when she was little. The air was fresh, the sky was blue, and for a moment everything felt normal. We walked side by side, talking about nothing in particular. Old memories, her plans for the future, and everyday gossip. I found myself smiling, more feeling comfortable around Emily. Maybe I had overreacted the night before. Maybe it was just a passing sensitivity. But as we walked farther into the park, there were times when our conversation stopped, leaving a silence that stretched on heavier than it should have. The air seemed heavy with unspoken thoughts, feelings I didn't want to acknowledge at one point when we reached a clearing with a beautiful view of the wide lawn ahead. Emily stopped and turned to me. "You've always been there for me," she said, her voice soft but serious. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Her words stopped me. The way she said it, the vulnerability in her voice, touched a deep part of me that made my heart ache. I tried to smile to lighten the mood. "Don't worry about it," I joked. "Dad's not going anywhere." But she didn't smile. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes locking with mine. "No, I mean, you're more than a dad to me. You're everything to me." I froze, her words hanging in the air, heavy and full of meaning. I wasn't ready to face. I searched Emily's face for some sign that she was being sentimental, that this was just an innocent moment between father and daughter. But there was something in her eyes, a look I couldn't ignore. "Emily," I whispered, my voice choked. "You know, Daddy loves you, right? But not like that. Not this way, I know," she replied, her voice thick with emotion, as she leaned closer. "But I can't stop thinking about Daddy. I try to push it out of my head, but it keeps coming back." I felt my heart pounding, my body freezing. This wasn't how a father and daughter should talk, should look at each other. My mind screamed at me to back off, to stop this before it got out of control. But my body seemed locked in place, unable to react. "We should go back," I said, my voice shaking. It's late before I could turn away. Emily reached out and gently took my hand, the touch innocent as it was, but the way her fingers brushed my skin made my stomach clench. "This shouldn't have felt like it, Dad," she said, her voice filled with something I couldn't name. "I know this isn't right, but I can't control how I feel." Panic rose within me. I pulled my hand away, taking a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. "Emily, we can't. This is wrong. You're my dad and we can't do this." She looked at me, her expression a mixture of confusion and hurt. "I'm not confused, Dad. I know how I feel, no." I shook my head, feeling the pain rise inside me. "This isn't right. You're my daughter and we can't." I couldn't finish my sentence. The words seemed too heavy, too dangerous to say out loud. Emily took another step toward me, her eyes fixed on mine, and I knew I had to do something to stop this before it went too far. I needed to keep some distance for both of us. "We should go home," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't right, Emily. We shouldn't be like this." Emily paused, bowing her head slightly, her voice full of disappointment. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I didn't mean to embarrass you like this." I took a deep breath, trying to control the emotions that were flooding my heart. "It's okay, baby," I said softly, even though I knew it wasn't okay. "We just need to keep some distance." We drove home in silence, and the air between us was heavier than ever. I knew things would never be the same again. A boundary had been crossed. And though we hadn't crossed it, something had changed forever after we got home. Neither of us said another word. Emily went straight to her room, and I stood in the living room looking around the empty house. Everything was the same, but the heaviness in my heart made the house feel even stranger. Part of me wanted to run up to my room, talk to Emily, clear things up. But I knew that would only make things worse. I sat down on the sofa, my mind racing with thoughts. Emily was my daughter, and I couldn't imagine that we would end up like this. Memories of her childhood came flooding back, days when she ran around the house laughing and playing, and I was always watching over her, ready to protect her from any danger. Now things were different. Emily was an adult, no longer the innocent little girl she was, but I was her father, and my love for her should have ended there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions and fears. What had made Emily feel this way? Was it because I was too close to her? I wondered if I had done something wrong in raising our child. Our relationship, which should have been simple and innocent, had become unimaginably complicated the next morning. I woke up exhausted. I hoped that the heavy emotions of the day before would dissipate, but instead, they only grew heavier. Emily had left the room without saying a word to me. The air between us was so stuffy that it was hard to breathe while I was sitting at the dining table. Emily came downstairs neatly dressed, clearly preparing to leave. "I'll be back to school soon," she said, her voice calm, but I could sense the worry hidden within. I nodded, not knowing what to say. "Maybe that's a good thing," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "We need some space." She looked at me, her eyes sad, but she said nothing more. Emily packed her things, and a few minutes later, she was ready to leave. I stood in the doorway watching her walk to the car. My heart heavy. Everything between us had changed. Forever. Have a safe trip, I said, my voice catching in my throat. She turned back to look at me, her eyes torn. "Thanks, Dad," she whispered. Ben quietly got into her car and drove away. I stood there watching Emily's car disappear. Down the familiar drive, when she was gone, the house felt empty and eerily quiet. The whole place seemed to have lost a part of its soul, and I couldn't help but feel like I had lost something irretrievably. I knew that distance would give us time to calm down, to think, and to sort out our feelings. But I couldn't deny that things had gone too far, and I didn't know if our relationship would ever be the same again. In the weeks that followed, I tried to get back to normal, but nothing was the same. The house was too quiet without Emily, and I couldn't stop thinking about her. Memories of that moment of her eyes kept swirling in my mind. I wanted to believe that the distance would help ease the pain, that the feeling would fade with time. But deep down, I knew that once something changed, it would never be the same again. Something between Emily and I was broken, and no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't get back to where we started. One weekend afternoon, I received a text from Emily. She wrote that she was trying to work through her mixed emoji, that she knew things weren't right, and that she needed time to think. I read each message, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. Emily needed time, and so did I. Maybe with enough time and distance, we would find a way to mend our relationship, but maybe things would never be the same again. Sighed, closed my phone, and looked out the window. The city in the distance was still peaceful, but not in my heart. Maybe only time would answer the questions that neither Emily nor I could face right now. My story is a lesson in the boundaries of family relationships that we should never cross as parents. We have a responsibility to care for and love our children unconditionally. But we also need to understand that love must be accompanied by respect and necessary distance. There will be times in life when we feel confused, especially when relationships change over time. But it is important to stay sober and set clear boundaries. I would advise anyone who is a parent or anyone who is nurturing a close relationship that it is important to maintain clarity about your roles. Don't let emotions blur the lines between father and child, mother and child, or other relationships. Small moments can turn into big cracks if left unchecked. And once those cracks appear, they are extremely difficult to repair. The lesson I learned is to always be smart, know what is right and wrong, and know when to stop before things go too far. Respecting boundaries is the only way to protect the important relationships in life. Thanks for watching my story. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this.